Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to our very last colloquium of the department and of the psychology department's colloquium series on this unusual sort of wet Monday afternoon. So thank you all for joining us, and it is my absolute honor to be able to introduce to you our last speaker this afternoon, who is Professor Lynn Hendricks, who is an associate professor in the Division of Health Systems and Public Health in the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences here at Stellenbosch, and holds a joint PhD in social science and public health. She has expertise in methods, innovation, stakeholder engagement, and knowledge translation, and she leads the social and environmental determinants of health transdisciplinary interest group at Stellenbosch University. She's the founding director of the research consultancy Research Ambition and founding co-director of the NPO Hearts in Action. She is a fellow of Gilead Public Health, as well as a fellow of Microsoft Society and AI. She's a board member of the Center for HIV/AIDS Management and is a long-standing previous executive member of the Psychological Society of South Africa, and she now serves as divisional executive for the Division of Climate and Environmental Psychology. She has a keen interest in creative and co-productive research in communities and works with digital mediums, as well as primary arts-based methods. Her work includes co-producing a local and international public art exhibition with the Iziko South African Museum and a community-led documentary about young Cape Flats-based woman who contracted HIV perinatally. She's received the 2023 Springer Nature Inclusive Health Research Award, the 2023 Cochrane Thomas C. Chalmers Award, and the 2024 CISA Community Service Award in recognition of her work. Lynn, it's wonderful to have you here this afternoon. Thanks so much for being here, and we are very much looking forward to your talk. Colleagues, if you have any comments or questions, I would ask that you please keep this to the end of the presentation, where we will have a session dedicated to this. Lynn, thank you so much, and over to you.
Thanks, Bronwyn, and thank you, colleagues, for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you today and to be presenting at the psychology department. Psychology is my first love. It's always been, always will be. I'm currently placed in health systems and public health at Stellenbosch University. And the work I do bridges psychology and public health and social sciences together in a blend where we try to do transdisciplinary work with the ultimate aim of health equity. And what I want to share with you today is how I've started thinking around inclusive research ecosystems. And of course, I'm sure that a lot of you have thought about this in one way or the other, and that your work lends itself to this in different aspects, and your work in communities, your work with different interest holders, the type of areas that you are focusing in on your work, the type of methodologies you are using. So I'm very excited to hear your feedback as well. So I've left this first slide up because I have presented this before, but I've noted, I've checked who's attending, and no one was at the talk that I did a week ago on the same topic. So I'm going to share with you what I shared at the Nature Forum. And also just to start thinking around, what does inclusive research ecosystems mean? What does it look like? And then share with you some case examples. So I also might end off, and if I don't get through all the slides, that's okay. I will share them with you so that you can also have a look at them. But I really want to work towards values-based research. And so my thinking around inclusive health systems and inclusive health research ecosystems are taking me towards value-based research. And I'm going to share a little bit of the journey with you in a very simplified way, I hope. And so in thinking around inclusive research ecosystems, and when I started looking at, what has been done in this area before, because it's always good practice to see, what have others said, what have others done, before you try to either add on or build on the foundations of what are already there. And to be honest, there was really little that I could find on the big term, inclusive research ecosystems. People have written about inclusive research quite a bit. People have written a lot about knowledge ecosystems, knowledge economies. But when you look at these together, even Wellcome doesn't really define what a research ecosystem is. So they give us who the characters are, who are the agents or the stakeholders. They give us what some of the roles and the responsibilities of these stakeholders are, like they say, are researchers and the outputs they produce, or research managers or funders or private sectors. But there's no real broad like definition of what this is. And what we're looking for is that we try to understand the development, how it operates beyond what the parts are, and knowing what the system consists of. So a research ecosystem can refer to an interconnected or dynamic network of individuals, institutions, resources, policies, and processes that collectively support or drive the research process. So we're focusing here today specifically on the research process. And these includes actors and stakeholders, dynamic systems, and resources and dependencies. Dependencies meaning that you need something from someone in order to function or facilitate the work that you are doing. So when we think about ecosystems, and I have a beautiful little biology science picture here for you. Ecosystems are really wonderful thing. They're all about give and take. They're the networks of plants, animals, microbiomes in their natural environments, and they all interact together. They all need one another. They all benefit and they all do something. Essentially, they rely on one another for survival. And in a very simple yet complex way. Because as soon as we take one of these parts away, then something happens to the system. If there's no rain, it means the plants aren't going to grow. The plants aren't growing, it means animals don't have shelter, animals don't have food, the roots aren't there, there's no oxygen being provided. If we take the animals away, then we have overpopulation of next level animals or the level before that. If the soil is eroded, the trees are not going to grow. So each of these parts are really important. One is not more important than the other. They just are placed in the ecosystem in different places and spaces, but they all rely on one another. In every ecosystem, it can be large or it can be small. It can be as small as the ecosystem that you find in the pond that is in your garden. Or it can be as small as the ecosystem that's happening under the doormat at your front door. But what it is in that ecosystem, that there's a unique balance that it brings to how these organisms and things rely on one another. And there are three main characters in the stories of ecosystems. They are producers, consumers, and decomposers. A producer in this example, they use light to synthesize and make food. So plants, for example. The consumers, they directly or indirectly depend on the producers for the food. So you can see we've got the squirrel and the fox as the primary and secondary consumers. But they rely on these producers for their work, for their food, and for their supply. And then we also have the decomposers. So you can see the soil decomposes at the bottom. Being a decomposer is not a bad thing. A decomposer is also really important. Well, number one, they make sure that they eliminate the decay, but they also use this decay for their own nutrition. So whatever is overproduced, dead, or needs to be reused, the decomposers then repurpose those for other functions. But they all need one another in the system and in this ecosystem. So if we think about research ecosystems, what do these really look like when we start to unpack them? The term eco refers to a part of the world, to the many parts, and the system refers to the coordination of these many parts. So a research ecosystem then is what parts in the research world are there and what are the coordinating units? What is the flow? How do they interact together? Now, before I show you the slide, it's not a personal attack. Remember, everyone is important. Everyone has their own role and everyone has an equal part to play in this ecosystem. When I showed this last week, the reviewers were not happy with where they are. But unfortunately, in the example, that's where they fall. Let me just see if this thing will change. So if you look at this, we think about where would we put communities in the system? Where would we put researchers or funders or reviewers or policymakers? How would we configure them? So I'm going to give you just a few seconds. If you want, feel free to put in the chat where you would put researchers. Where would you put communities? Then we can have a look and see what you say as to who goes where. If you think about communities and researchers, just going to see if I can make sure I open the chat too so that I can see if there's anything coming through. See, their researchers are part of the communities. And so where would they be on the map? Would they be in the soil? Would they be the trees? Would they be the squirrel, the fox, the sun? So let's have a look and see if the analogy pans out. So how we've placed these in the forest ecosystem that I have here is that I've marked in red where I could put the researchers and other interest holders onto this ecosystem. So in this ecosystem, we've got different actors who act as different species and organisms contributing to the research ecosystem's health. Each has its own role, but it's interdependent on one another. The researchers are like the producers, they create knowledge. Maybe funders could be the ones providing nutrients or funding. Communities could be in the soil. They are the foundation of what we are doing, the essential context. You can't plant all types of seeds on one single type of soil. Not all areas of research are relevant for all contexts. There also could be research limitations. So, I mean, resource limitations in terms of the rain, less resources going into a community could mean slower growth. It could limit innovation. There's competition for funding. And you know how people decide on research priorities. It's really driven by social factors. And economics is just not the amount of money that counts. Okay, so the community or the context really dominates how these trees grow or how this knowledge is made. Then I've got the ethics and reviewers as the soil decomposers, meaning they take what is now being produced, what is left over. They're looking at what can be done, how it can be refined, how it can be made into something more. Researchers can be consumers and producers. Decision makers can be considered secondary consumers. Our data, which is the carbon dioxide coming in, needs to be filtered before we can produce it as oxygen or as evidence. And this seems all really great and nice, but is it an honest reflection? Because in fact, research is really messy. Research is really complex. It's not as easy as we make it seem in this neat version of the ecosystem, because there are thunderstorms, there's money coming and going, there's different things happening at the level of the decision maker. that influences how evidence is used or consumed. There's pollution in the waters. There are different social and economic factors, cultural factors, contextual timing that influences how communities engage with the research ecosystem. They face their own set of environmental factors in this unpredictable, messy world of research ecosystems. And in fact, research ecosystems are not standalone, but they are embedded within existing systems, whether it's policy systems, community level systems, other knowledge systems, environmental systems, for example. But they are really complex, just like natural ecosystems. And when we look at this embeddedness in existing ecosystems, we realize that to be inclusive of research ecosystems, we need to take the other systems into account. There are other issues when it comes to data that have far surpassed what can be contained within a research ecosystem. If you think about AI, data integrity, big data sets, the ethics of data. When it comes to funding, there's a lot of other reasons and things going on that determine types of projects that are funded, who is funded, where it's funded. I don't know how many funding applications come and it says you must have a UK partner and funds must be paid to the UK partner and then to the LMIC. Even underground, there are lots of ecosystems that are continuously happening. But these must be navigated if we want inclusive research ecosystems to flourish. So bearing that in mind and where we are at with understanding these inclusive research ecosystems, what I'm going to show you now is some examples of projects we used where we try to navigate these, not perfectly, I'll never say they're perfect, but I think adequately enough to make an impact. So the first project I'd like to share with you is called More Than a Pill. And in this project, we use systematic review findings to determine what the priority research question was and what the research group was that should be targeted in the intervention. The area of work we were working in here was adherence to antiretroviral treatment. Through the review findings of over 4 years and 4 reviews later, we decided on working with young people perinatally infected with HIV. What you see here is a storyboard of the review findings, which we then used within our primary research. Going into the research, we adopted an approach of allyship, where we understood that we would value certain aspects of human relational values as an approach to our work. And these in allyship was also about being transparent as researchers, valuing people's perspectives as equal, respect, reflexivity, meaning we reflected on our roles and their roles. We did this individually and together. And we also understood that every action of each person in this group would influence others' reaction and vice versa. How we did this study was that we used participatory methodologies like digital storytelling, documentary making, photo voice, art, sensory types of data collection. We asked participants to join us in deciding where the exploration would take us. So the research question was exploring the lives and adherence to antiretroviral treatment for young women. There were no set objectives. These were determined together with the participants. And most of our data collection happened like this, where we would be in stillness in places like their home, the clinic, the road, wherever they said we needed to go, or we decided together. And we would listen to places, we would smell the places, we would touch the places, and we would document reflexively what it made us feel, and then try to uncover the connection to how you take medication. hence the name More Than a Pill, because it's not just about taking the medication. This is an example outside, looking out of the window of someone's room. And what you see here is a plug that leads to the outside of this young woman's bedroom. And you would think that, it's just a plug, but it's not just a plug. When we laid in the room, so she was laying on a bed, I was laying on the floor, and we were looking around, and she was telling me things in her room that really bug her. It works on her nerves. She can't take it. It gives her anxiety. What you see is the plug going out, and the photo on the far left, this is what she sees on the outside of a window. At night, the window stays open because of this plug, so everything is really loud. She can hear people talking. She's getting cold in her room. She's not enjoying being in her room. She can hear toilets flushing. She can hear people peeing around the corner. It smells and it stinks. And also, why does this bother you so much, besides the fact that it stinks and it's noisy and it's cold? She says, because it's my fault. Because I am sick. My father has to do this because they pay him to use our electricity. So she blames herself for this experience. And so when she takes a medication or she lays in her room, she's reminded of the fact that she's sick, and it makes her angry and not want to take a medication. And this connection would never have been made if we had never been in her room. There's no way she would have told me about the plug that is, making her feel so upset. And so the inclusiveness in this is about also including spaces, but also being inclusive of people telling us what it is they want to explore in our research project, our meaning, mine, and theirs. So I'm going to go forward a little bit. These are some of the artifacts we collected. And so these came from saying, what in this room is something that you have a physical reaction to. And so in the room, we were in the clinic space individually with each of the participants. These are the items that they chose as their items. All of this can be viewed in the documentary that's available online. I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is about inclusivity. And we also did an art exhibition. So we've done it here, we've done it in Belgium, but it's an interactive art exhibition where you can engage right onto the story that they've given, add in your own piece, then we photocopy it, and the next time we present it, we share it again, and people can add on. You can look and touch and feel the artifacts. You can stand against the body maps, and you can see how you feel in their own stories. But using these types of methodologies brought the research to life, not only for people viewing these exhibitions, but also for us as the co-research team. And so the impact of this is that we were able to make sense of the evidence as lived experiences. So it was a living experience of being with the data. We also have now a community of support. So we still have our WhatsApp group 4 years later where we are chatting with one another, and the young women have found each other in this study. It's been transformational for us and them. It's changed who I am as a researcher. But also what we can present to the world is some real world change based on the findings. And this is an example. This is the room that I met each of them in individually in 2019, 2020, when they were recruited into the study. We have won an award for this work, and so it was really beautiful. It came full circle. We were able to use the award money to re-envision the space as a youth-friendly waiting room. So we are all really proud as a research team of the work we have done and what we've achieved to make a really sustainable impact back into the community where we have worked. So this is just one of the projects of the new lab we have started, which is inclusive strategies to promote innovation for research, in research for equity. And here the focus really is on building inclusive strategies in terms of methods, theories, and really working with communities. I'm going to stop in a few minutes, but I'll just share like 2 or 3 projects that we are working on, which I think Bronwyn, Rizwana, and Kitso are involved in the public square. in social and environmental determinants of health. And here we are really trying to build towards understanding how do we enable environments for people for their health. And so we try to be inclusive in our methods and in our community engagement approaches. We've had 2 workshops so far. I've skipped one now. The first one was to understand what our goals were and what we want to achieve. And the second one, I think there were 2 workshops after this where we met with the public. This was the theory we started out with around how people make health decisions. And you can see it's got different factors here, from time, context, to the environment, to physical items. And through discussions with communities, we have been able to advance that conversation and theoretical thinking to what people say influences their health decision making. And the numbers here indicate the number of community people who have said finances determine my decision making, safety, education, politics, mental health. So these are the things that we will take forward in conversation, just like we have done before. We advertise a poster, LinkedIn, social media. We share it on all our community platforms, and people show up. Could be a hairdresser today, a politician tomorrow. We never know who's coming, but the conversation is always really rich. We've got different projects like the Happy Project, where we're working with primary school children in looking at how we prevent pregnancy in youth under 12. We've used social media. We've done a learner program, which has been co-designed with primary school kids. They have answered, questions they want answered. We worked with our visual arts department because we really want to bring kids to the conversation when it comes to sexual health. And we've learned so much from them. So that brings us to the question, how do we enable research ecosystems to be inclusive? And if you look at this, there is so much going on. I mean, I've showed you some examples where we've attempted to be inclusive. I'm sure you also have a really amazing examples that you could share around this. But we have come up with these 6 things, which we are working on. This is a work in progress. Nobody has the answers yet, but really it has to be collaborative. Stakeholders, researchers, communities, funders must work together to share knowledge and resources. It must be sustainable, because it's not inclusive, it's not sustainable. Because then you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, and then when you're gone, it disappears. That's not inclusive, that's for you. It should maintain its productivity and relevance over time. There must be a continuous flow of ideas and innovation. I think one of the key things is that you must do research that belongs to everybody. The research you're doing is not for you. It's for what it wants to achieve, what impact it wants to make. You have to be resilient to be able to withstand things, changes to policy, funding cuts without collapsing. It must be inclusive in terms of resilience, sustainability, transparency, must be open communication. There has to be trust that you build between yourself and the stakeholders, and it has to be values-based. So I'm going to end there, and hopefully it sparked some conversation for you, some dialogue, and hopefully we can talk about that today. But really, it's about unlocking the full potential of research and making sure that no one is left behind in the pursuit of equity. So thank you, everyone, for giving me your attention for this presentation.
Then thanks so much. And I see a number of virtual rounds of applause. So thank you so much for sharing your really important work that you've done and continue to do and think about, and sharing your thinking process with us. I think it's definitely I think this idea of building research ecosystems and exactly what that means is very, very important. And I really enjoyed the way in which you presented it and are thinking about it. And of course, at the foreground of it being the notion of inclusivity. So, colleagues, there are a number of you in attendance today, which is wonderful to see. Thank you for joining from a range of faculties and departments. And I wonder if anyone has any comments or questions for Lynn about this work, even just where you are at in terms of your own thinking and the work that you're doing. So, Lynn, as people are thinking about some comments or questions, can you talk to us a little bit more about your public engagement work and how do you, so you spoke about advertising on social media and what has been your experience in terms of the actual sort of practicalities of arranging these things and who attends and what that has meant in terms of sort of how you think about and conceptualize that these questions of, so you mentioned from a hairdresser to a politician, but who is attending and so ultimately what when we talk about public engagement, how public is this engagement?
Thank you, Bronwyn. I think, for me, I was very surprised at the first workshop we had, at the people who turned up. And then I was also really excited because when I kept asking people, how did you hear about this? They're like, no, someone sent it to me on WhatsApp. So I make a real effort to post it on our own academic social platforms and then also on our personal Facebooks, LinkedIn. But I've also made everything like JPEG, so pictures, so that people can share it very easily on WhatsApp. Because sometimes when you send PDFs, then people aren't really able to either open it or it seems too academic, is what I've heard when something is a PDF. But if it's a fun looking JPEG meme that you can send and people are like, oh, this is cool. And then also a really practical thing is some people send just the image without the link of where you can actually join and without the text. So then I also write a little blurb like what it's about, and I make sure I say everybody is welcome, not just for academics. Like I have to say that, whilst people still assume they're not invited. And I put the links there, and I say if you can't follow the link, here's a WhatsApp number. Send me a message. So like just making sure that it speaks to everyone, and people forward all those parts. And then also making sure that I don't force people to register. So some people will say, like, I don't know how to fill in the form. Then I'll say, just come, just show up. And they're like, can I bring so and so? People also don't know that they can bring like their friends. I'm like, bring however many people. Just tell me you bring in 4 people or 5 people. But then also direct targeting. So emailing or messaging people who are connected in the community and saying, can you bring 5 people with you? So I think it's just been really purposeful about the simplest things. The people that have come so far have been literally community members who want to come because the topics of interest to them, policymakers, people from the clinics, people from the university, people from the faculty, multiple disciplines of people have shown up. And I think it's also the work we do post the workshop. So we film every workshop, we create little blurbs for social media, we do media inserts. If you follow my LinkedIn page, you will see lots of 30-second clips, 1-minute clips, pictures of the workshop. People love to see themselves in pictures. So it encourages them to come to the next one. We also share lots of follow-up work with the delegates that arrive.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lynn. Kapano, go ahead.
Thanks, Bronwyn. Hello, Lynn.
Hi, Kapano.
You said you wanted to visit us at the department. This is not the visit. This is not a
Oh
visit.
no, it doesn't count. It's virtual, like
It
steps.
does not count. I think you should come and you can repeat this just to show us how you do it. I love the presentation, Lynn. I love the work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Everybody was clapping virtually when you talked about how you did. You fixed that room. That's fantastic. I have so many questions, but let me ask just two. Could you, well, the first thing is maybe to say something about when you showed that clip of the connection, electricity connection from the room to the shacks outside, and you said something about that it enabled, I'm just paraphrasing what you said, it enabled her to tell you about things she may not have been able to show or tell a researcher if you're not there. I love that. I love that for a number of reasons, because it among these is because it connects with this idea I've been having around place-based knowledge. And so you articulating that, right? That some things would be difficult if you are not in place, and then you can show that. I'd like you to say something a little bit more about that, whether there are other things around this multisensory process that you can share, because it fills in the gap for me when I'm trying to explain to people exactly that. And then the second part, where you earlier on you said something about the work is value based. Say something more about that. What do you mean?
The work must be
Value based. You said something about value based, and you said it also towards the end when you showed the I don't know, the ecosystem, that about sustainability, about collaboration, and then you had value based there as well, I think. Could you say more about what you mean by that? I want to hear whether, I want you to add to my own thinking about value based research.
Yeah. Thank you, Kapana. It was a very difficult thing for me to kind of work out in the beginning around this place-based and photo voice and digital story making, because there were times in the community where we wanted to explore the community and the matter. So like the actual physical attributes of the community and how it engaged people's bodies and minds for themselves, but we were unable to because of safety.
Mhm.
So like the community maps we made at the campus, and then we would go back and drive in the car with the map printed out, and we would say, okay, yeah, this is what happens here. And we would look so that we could drive away very fast.
Mm.
And there were times where we had to go to places like Greenpoint Park, for example, to be in nature and to talk about the community that they are from.
Mhm.
Which was also really powerful because they could relax. Nature takes you to a space that is a nice, reflexive, deep thinking space, very relaxed. But it was equally as powerful to be in their bedrooms and in their houses. Firstly, I could connect with them and their families on a personal, relational level. And so we built our relationships and we built trust. But being in their rooms when we were calm and we were quiet, their rooms held a lot of stories and memories and data that would not have been, I guess, as visible to them if we were just in an interview in another space. Because by touching the walls, it paused us for a moment to be in the space. By breathing in the room, we could be in the space. And so when we looked around the room, it wasn't just the question like, what does this room do to you? It was like looking carefully at everything in the room. And our eyes kind of traveled in the room. And so we could pause at different spaces. And that's how that plug emerged. Because it was carefully, purposefully looking at the space and seeing and making the connections. And so I do think there's something really powerful about place-based research, but also using your whole body to experience the place and not just being in the place. if that makes sense. But also questioning what your body's feeling and what it's doing with your senses. It was the first time I've done it, but it's definitely something I will continue to do because I think it's a very important piece that we sometimes miss. And I don't think the photos do it justice if I had to just do a photo voice study.
Bronwyn, if you allow me, I don't see any hand. Can I just follow up?
Yes, of course.
So you mentioned there's still the second one I wanted to hear a little bit more about Billy. But so you mentioned Greenpoint. So you were suggesting, just so I hear you clearly, and I like that. So not only the shacks outside the room, but if you go to Greenpoint, that it makes it possible to generate other thoughts. Like you said, they were relaxed there, which is different from elsewhere, or when you're stopping in a car, say here. So the places in themselves generate other responses, affects and thoughts. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes, and so we also did a camp. I don't know if I don't think I mentioned that in this presentation. At the conclusion, we had a production camp. And this is actually the first time all of them met for the first time after a year of working individually with each person. And on this camp, which was a weekend getaway, most of them have never been away for the weekend. They each had their own bedrooms, their own toilets. We had a green room, we had a pool, we had a makeup room, we had communal spaces. But just in being together, we also started looking at other types of data that emerged because now they were starting to talk about their stories with one another, not with me. And somehow their stories also started making sense for them in ways that it didn't before. And so even when you watch the footage, and not on the video per se, but the footage where I watch their self-recorded interviews in the green room, answering the questions that is up on the board, the answers are even different to what they said in the individual part of the work. Because it's like deeper, it's like connecting all the dots. And so the last day of that camp, we selected together what would go in and what would stay out, whose story would feature in different parts of the documentary. So they, in fact, chose the storyboards and how the story was told in the documentary. When I would say, like, for example, no, my story, I think your story speaks about mine and hers, so let's use yours. That's what the conversation was like. And maybe I will show this part because I don't want my mommy to see this part, but you don't mind your mommy seeing, so put in your part. And so it was very interesting. I actually haven't written up yet how different types of data emerged in different points of this research study. There's so much to think about post the study. It's so rich that I don't think I'll spend the rest of my life writing it up, I suppose. But in terms of the value-based research, I was quite intentional about this without understanding why in the very beginning. So even if you see my PhD proposal from 2019, I speak about values. The very first paper I published was around allyship and these values. And I didn't quite understand the importance until I finished my study and I looked at when I reflected on my own study and how it was transformative for me as a researcher. I understood why it was important. Because for me, it's more than ethics. It's more than ticking the boxes and saying these are the list of things and considerations I must have. It's about being a human being and mutually respecting another human being. And when you do that, the ethics fall into place. It's about being transparent. So one of the things I did in the first interviews with all of my participants, I would say, I would explain, this is what the study is about. Tell me about yourself. And as soon as they're done, I physically turned the voice recorder towards me. And I said, now it's your turn. You can ask me anything because this is how we're going to do the work. We're going to be transparent. As much as I ask you, you can ask me. And they were like, anything. And I said, yes, you can ask me anything. because it was important for me to be as transparent as I'm requesting them to be, but that is a value. That's not ethics.
Mm.
And so I think, that conversation is still evolving in my head, like I was speaking to you about the other day. And I found this book on my bookshelves called The Book of Virtues that I got in second year of undergrad. My philosophy lecturer gave it to me. And I saw it on my bookshelf. I was like, I wonder if this is the book that's imprinted somewhere here at the back that has influenced my thinking into this values-based research that I just can't let go of. Is it the fact that my parents are pastors and just drilled this into my head and I can't escape it? But somewhere in me at the core is this belief in values and just human respect and relationships with one another, whether it's in your work or in your relationships, with personal relationships or whatever you're doing. These should be the core fundamental truths that we are living by.
Thank you, Kafana. I see a comment from Neil. Any reflections on performative allyship from the work that you're doing?
And maybe you must just try to tell me what you mean by performative allyship, please, if you don't mind.
Neil, please go ahead. Thanks.
So sorry. Thank you so much for the very informative and inspiring presentation, Prof. I was just wondering, regarding your comment on the paper that you wrote, you spoke a bit about you spoke about allyship, and so I'm wondering if in the work that you do, also thinking about the different types of positionalities at play in the places that you work in. Have you come across any different versions of allyship that maybe at sometimes can conflict or appear irrational to some people, but rational to others?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when I first saw the words performative allyship, I thought, these are people pretending to be allies, but really aren't, which is the case. I've sat on a couple of grant making exercises this year where I just removed myself because I didn't feel it was moving in the right direction. It's people saying they want community engaged, but they're in month 6 of the meeting and there's still nobody from the community in the panel. But they're writing a whole proposal about community engagement and they're not open to inviting people into the space. It's like it's protected or elite. So of course I've come across this, and also it's blatantly in your face when you're working with community members who have experienced researchers before you. It's like people are from broken relationships with researchers that have come in, been really, in touch with them, built relationships, and then just disappeared. And then you are left trying to firstly build trust, but also prove to them that all researchers are not the same. Again, that comes with its own pros and cons because here I am now 2 years after the fact, and I still have these 7 young women who still contact me when they are in need of something, be it money, time, someone to just listen. And I don't have the time like I did when I was busy with my PhD, when everything was invested in them. So it doesn't matter how much detaching work you do, you never truly can break up with somebody like that because you will break them as people because you've built a lot of trust. So you can't just disappear as a researcher or as a community worker. You're forever now connected with that person. And that's something also I don't think we talk about enough. We talk a lot about reflection, we talk a lot about trustworthiness, but we don't talk about breaking up with participants and what that means and what it does to them or how to do it properly. But that's a story for another day, the breaking up part.
Thank you, Neil and Lynn. And this lovely comment from Marnus. who says that he watched more than a pill on YouTube after your Cochrane presentation, and it generally broadened his perspectives on the possibilities and benefits of collaboration within the research process, and encouraged him to think more deeply about reflexivity in his own work. Thanks, Magnus, for that. Colleagues, I don't see any more comments or questions, so I'm assuming that there are no more pressing issues. And so I'll say, Lynn, thank you so much for your time. I think, Kapana, I see your camera is on. Did you want to add something?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was, I didn't want to hog the stage, but if people nobody's asking,
sure, go ahead. We have a couple minutes left.
So
yeah.
a couple of things, Lynn. Really, I really would like you and I to chat to you when you have time, because we have to do together this value-based theoretical paper with some illustrative cases, and you seem to have done it exceedingly well. I mean, much more. I'm still mostly in the theoretical space. I do some photo voice work, as you might know or not, and I separate the community engaged work, the community work, from the research work. So, but you do it splendidly well. So thank you. Please. I mean that. I mean, we've done one together on race a long time ago. We should do one on this, if you are free. And maybe I'm adding to that, because that will be a different one from a place-based processes in research. Now I've just learned a lot just in this 1 hour. So thanks, Lynn, about that. But please visit our department and show us how to do this. Really, you must. Next year, when you have time. I know you're busy and all of that. You gotta do
maybe
this.
I mean, to have a public engagement workshop hosted through us, Lynn, that's also, and have people join.
That's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
Let's do that. We've got some amazing comments in the chat, Lynn. Please have a look.
Thank you so much.
At them afterwards. And I think you've definitely inspired a lot of thought, and also people looking inwardly and perhaps critically at themselves and their own research and what they're doing. And I'm speaking about myself here too. And working with you this past year has certainly opened my eyes up to just the possibility of and the importance of the work that you do. So colleagues, thank you for joining here this afternoon. Lynn, mostly thank you to you. And we continue to be inspired by this amazing kind of work. And I think there's a lot more to see from this going forward. So have a wonderful week further, colleagues. It's that time of the year where we're all busy and every minute counts. So enjoy. Happy holidays. See you all for the Colloquium series in 2025. So goodbye for now. Thanks, colleagues.
Thanks so much,
Bye,
colleagues.
Brian.
This has
Bye-bye,
been great.
Lynn.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye, colleagues.